Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 251. Facing Against Competition. Yawn. Can we do this some other time? Jaku said to the hooded figure. Boss, look at this guy disturbing my sleep. The hooded figure chuckled. There's no one here to help you, he said. I have come here to settle a debt. The man raised his arm, revealing a scimitar underneath his hood, before pointing it towards Jaku's face. It glistened under the moonlight, showing its incredible sharpness. One of you, Dragonborns, bested one of ours. I have only come here to prove that it was not you who won, but one of us who failed. And I am here to correct that. Michael watched this scene unfold from the sidelines. Jaku's facing the Stone Cold too, meaning he's the second best soldier in their group. And he wasn't even the only one among them who was approached by a hooded figure. On the other screen, Michael saw Omisu sitting in a mostly empty library as a hooded figure approached her from the shadows. Oh no, Omisu muttered under her breath. What about the books? They're going to get destroyed. The hooded figure stopped in the middle of her tracks as she saw Omisu look in her direction. This startled her for a little bit before she chuckled. Impressive for a demi-human, the hooded figure said. I didn't expect much, but it seems that 5 lost for a reason. The hooded figure took off her robe, revealing a long frizzy hair standing up above her head that was tied up into the shape of a giant number 3. We're going to have to fight, you and I, she said. Omisu shook her head. Oh no, what about the books? I'm going to destroy them. Just then, Michael's soothing voice came out of the shadows and reassured the anxious Dragonborn. Really, boss? You're going to replace them? Yipey! Stone Cold 3 looked at Omisu with a strange gaze. She thought that the Dragonborn was crazy, talking to no one except the empty shadows. Of course, Michael was behind those dark spaces in between the shelves. Master, there's one more hooded figure, Fudge said, pointing Michael's attention to the last rectangular screen in front of him. This time, the vision showed a jungle-like scenery outside of Angora City. Underneath the foliage of the trees, Michael saw a couple of evolved red mankeys camping under the stars. They gathered around a campfire, with the sounds of crackling firewood echoing in the woods. They seemed to be quite exhausted after a hard training session, with some mankeys massaging each other's backs and polishing their weapons. Just then, a twig cracked in the distance, alerting the red mankeys of an intruder. TSK. I thought I would be finding something valuable once I followed you guys here, but it was all for nothing. You're just a bunch of mankeys. Not worth my time. A large, burly man draped in a hooded robe came out of the woods and approached the apprehensive mankeys. His tall height and the obvious muscles underneath the robe intimidated the small mankeys. Please tell me there's a dragonborn among you, the hooded figure shouted. The red mankeys eyed the intruder before slowly grabbing their weapons from the ground. Come on, really? No dragonborns? It seems I wasted my time. I'll go back to the city now. Just as the hooded figure turned around, he suddenly felt the hairs on his arms stand up. His instincts flared, making his muscles contract and flex before he turned around to face whatever monster was hiding behind him. But when he looked, there was no one there except the red mankeys. Ho ho! I may not be as talented as those dragonborns, but I would like to think that I can keep you company for a little while. At least I think so. The burly man codenamed 4 scanned the red mankeys before his eyes set onto another hooded figure standing unassumingly in front of him. If he hadn't spoken up, he wouldn't have even noticed him. Who are you? For asked. I am just a relic of the past, young one, Grieve muttered with a laugh. Meanwhile, back at the castle, Michael stared at the 4 screens in front of him. That's 4 of them, he thought to himself. Originally, there's 6 of them, but Zion already defeated a guy named 5. The Shadow Orcs are facing 6. Jaku is fighting 2. Omisu will battle 3. And Grieve will engage with 4. That meant that there was only one other member of Stone Cold Six left. And coincidentally, it was the strongest member of them all codenamed One. If they were trying to defeat the Dragonborns in public to declare themselves as the superior company, then it didn't make sense why they wouldn't send out their strongest fighter. Unless he has a bigger mission. Michael's question was soon answered as suddenly, a large creaking sound echoed around the walls of the castle. Everyone turned to the gates and saw the drawbridge slowly lowering back down before smacking itself onto the stone brick roads. On the other side of the castle walls, a beautiful adorned carriage bigger than anything they had ever seen, came gracefully crossing the bridge. It was drawn by 4 chunky horses that seemed to have eaten nothing but whey protein. The carriage pushed through to the inside, forcing the guests to move closer to the castle walls. Who is that? Wait, that emblem looks familiar. It's from the Hephaestus Company. Even their emblem is made out of Damascus steel. I wonder how much they had to spend on the dwarven black market. The Duke had to stop his test drive of Michael's car as he awaited for the rude guest who came way too late at the party. Show yourself, Duke Stelmane demanded. The coachman walked over to the door and opened it, bowing before the owner stepped off. We have arrived, young master. The party is delighted with the arrival of the leader and owner of the greatly touted Hammerstone Company. The young master stepped off the carriage, showing himself be a very young man, about the same age as Michael himself. This young master wearing a black and gold tunic waved and bowed to the guests looking at him. Greetings. I am Christian Hammerstone, the proud owner of the 495th ranked company in the entire world, he said confidently. Pardon me for my late arrival. I have come from the Hephaestus family estate, you see. The rest of the guests whispered amongst each other, not expecting to see the owner of such a successful company be so young. While everyone was looking at Christian, Michael looked at the man beside him. It was Stone Cold One, the strongest member of their group. It seemed his task was protecting and serving their leader rather than fighting the Dragonborns. Christian then walked over to the Duke and bowed to his presence. Duke Stelmane, I hope that you consider my offer. Our company is the best there is. I am sorry to say this, but there is no one better than our company. He then looked at Michael. Excuse my methods, but I have sent out the very best of my men to defeat your employees. It is nothing personal, and it is only a way for the Duke to realize who he should accept as the sponsor. Michael ignored him and looked down at his shadows. The Dragonborns were there, listening to what was happening. Do you guys need any help there? Michael asked. The Shadow Orcs, Jakku, Omisu, and Grieve all had smiles on their faces as they looked down at the shadow beneath their feet. Are you kidding me, master? This is what we're made for, the Shadow Orcs muttered. I'll finish this in just a minute, Jakku said, yawning. Master, teach that arrogant prick a lesson, Omisu whispered. Ho-ho, you can leave this to us, Michael. Such an easy thing, ho-ho. Chapter 252, Jakku v2. Did you just say that you'll finish the fight in just a minute? What does that even mean? The hooded figure codenamed 2 looked at Jakku, scoffing at his indifference to the situation. I am the real deal, boy. If you think that just because you guys defeated one of ours then you could beat me, then you'll find yourself sorely wrong. I am 2, the second strongest warrior in the city, he declared. 2 finally took off his robe and showed his bald head. The man was wearing a similar icy blue armor as showcased by 5. But this armor set seemed a lot more special as its very structure was filled with intricate details of snowflakes made out of a unique blend of metal alloys. Its durability was second only to dwarven equipment. Even his scimitar looked unique. Do you know what this weapon is made of? He asked Jakku. If you were a little bit more interested in metals, then you would notice that the edge of my blade is lined with none other than Damascus steel. 2 proudly announced his weapon's greatest quality. Its strength, durability, and sharpness was not something that an ordinary bum from Angora City could appreciate. Yawn. Are you done talking? Let's fight already. 2 gritted his teeth, annoyed at Jakku's arrogance. He bent his legs low and burst towards Jakku at high speeds, with his scimitar above his head. The stone road beneath his feet cracked as it reached below 0 degrees Celsius, brought on by the natural icy magic of his boots. Even at this point, Jakku was still stretching his body as if he had just awoken from his sleep. Just as the scimitar was about to slice through his jugular, a sharp ting resounded in the empty road as Jakku's sword seemingly teleported right in front of 2's weapon. 2's eyes widened as he stared at Jakku's sword, which seemed to be crackling with intense lightning and electricity. Frozen Cleaver of the North. Tu shouted as his scimitar increased doubly in size as ice particles covered its very body. A 4-star spell was not something Jaku could take lightly. So, his feet began to burst in electrical energy as he activated his skill, Step in the Lightning. Jaku's entire body morphed into pure electricity, allowing him to zap away from his position up towards the rooftop of the building in front of him. You won't get away from me, Tu shouted as he cast Titanic Ice Age, morphing large ice formations under his feet almost 10 meters up, allowing him to jump up to the bricked rooftops of Angora City. Tu jumped from his ice structure and brought down his scimitar to Jaku, which was quickly parried by the Dragonborn's quick sword strikes. The usually empty and quiet skyline of Angora City was disturbed by the sounds of metal clashing against each other, sparks going off and falling from the rooftops. Tu's skillful mastery in the scimitar allowed him both power and speed to completely outclass Jaku. He fully expected the Dragonborn's sword to be chipped by now after all their clashing strikes. Yet, there was barely any scratch. What the hell is that sword made out of? Tu shouted in frustration. The same as you, but better, Jaku replied. Tu felt insulted at his response, taking out a white pill from his pockets and before swallowing it whole. His face scrunched as he felt the power tearing through his stomach. But after bearing through the pain, an unprecedented magical resource became readily available to his body. Tough luck, Dragonborn. You are facing a 5-star master of the scimitar. And with this cultivation pill, my strength has almost reached the 6-star realm. Tu's entire body began to turn pale and white as a cool aura oozed out of his body. It wasn't long before his skin turned bluer and bluer, before turning into a dark blue similar to the color of the ocean on a dark night. A cold mist radiated out of his body, spontaneously creating snow in a 10-meter radius around himself. Northern Blade, destroying ice. As Tu brought down his scimitar, pieces of stone bricks exploded as an invisible gigantic blade crashed through the rooftops, creating a large gash that destroyed 3 homes in succession. Crying and shouting resounded through the night as the citizens heard the disturbance in the sleep. Jaku materialized back from his electrical state just a few feet away from the large gash. But just as his feet landed, he felt an impermeable cold rush through his scaled feet, trying to trap him into place as another invisible sword crashed towards the rooftop. Tu smacked his lips as he saw blue wisps of lightning zap out of his attack. And before he could try to locate Jaku, he suddenly felt a tingling sensation near his ribs. As he looked down, he saw Jaku duck down with his sword in a swinging position as he tried to slice through his icy blue armor. Blood spurted out from his side as Jaku's sword flashed in a single moment. Tu gritted his teeth before raising his scimitar to bring down icy fury towards the Dragonborn. His scimitar slashed through a large part of a tailor's rooftop, slicing off a large chunk that slid down into the ground, smashing into rubble. Despite the destruction, Jaku escaped as fast as lightning. Stop running away, Tu shouted, haphazardly swinging his scimitar and creating chaos around the peaceful neighborhood. With each swing, his scimitar barely missed the lightning Dragonborn, hitting nothing but stone walls and bricked rooftops. Unfortunately, one of the disturbed citizens was caught unaware as he ran out of his house and into the street. Just then, a large chunk of wooden planks crashed down towards him. But at the very last moment, a streak of lightning flashed towards the old man. Blue light flashed before the wooden planks turned into cubed pieces, falling down into the ground harmlessly. The old man turned around and saw Jaku protecting him with his arm above his head. Thank you, the old man muttered. Ah, caught you now. Tu jumped down from the air and held his scimitar in both hands, ice and snow peeling off its very blade. The 4-star spell, Frozen Blade of Kuthra, was a very fast slash that even Jaku wouldn't be able to react to. But Jaku didn't even look back. He only assured the old man of his safety. Just as the scimitar was about to split his head in half, an invisible prismatic shield clashed with the Damascus steel blade of the scimitar. As the snow particles tried to cut through the invisible shield and turn it as brittle as a sheet of ice, Jaku's lesser unity defense used fire mana to completely melt the mana trying to cut through. The clashing of the two created brief sparks of light as their mana particles canceled each other out. What the hell is that defense? Tu screamed out. Once the old man ran off into safety, Jaku turned around to face Tu. His eyes were calm and unburdened. He had one hand on the hilt of his sword, and one hand holding a chocolate bar on his mouth which seemingly came out of nowhere. As Jaku consumed the chocolate, Tu felt his control over his scimitar become less and less powerful. He felt the invisible shield trying to actively eat through the Damascus blade itself, tearing it into metal shavings.
Impossible.
Sorry, Jaku said as he raised the katana in the air. It was only now that Tu realized that his sword was completely different from the one he wielded before. This one was glowing light blue, seemingly made out of pure lightning itself. Your 1 minute is up. Jaku swung his blade, lightning buzzing around it, and created a huge gash from Tu's shoulder to his thigh, flinging him 50 meters out before he crashed into the city walls, burying him in the rubble.
Chapter 253. Umisův Enger.
Stone Cold 3, codenamed 3, stared at Umisu with a wide grin on her face. In the midst of the confined space in the library, in the midst of all the books and scrolls stored in the shelves, Umisu's spear held no advantage whatsoever. 3 had specifically hunted down Umisu in this place because their preliminary investigations upon the Dragonborn showed her as timid and shy. She loved reading books so much that they knew she would hate it getting destroyed. Meanwhile, this would be the perfect place for 3 to showcase her unique skills. It's such a shame, 3 muttered. If your company weren't in the way of Hammerstone, then I think we could have been friends. 3 raised her feet and thrust it in the ground before a mechanical click came out of her tight-laced metal boots. Then, a sharp, thin blade came protruding out of her soles, creating a much deadlier version of ice skates. Snow World, she muttered as she bent down low on the ground and swept her left foot around in a circle. The metal blade left behind an icy residue that began spreading all around the library indiscriminately. The frost permeated through the wooden floorboards, slowly spreading upwards towards the walls. Its sub-zero temperature coupled with its magical properties allowed the ice to somehow freeze fire itself, creating a flaming ice sculpture that allowed the oil lamps to continue providing light in the library. The very few readers in the library ran out screaming as they felt the coldness almost freeze their legs into an icicle. Soon, the ice spread through the wooden shelves and books, turning the library into an icy, desolate landscape. It wasn't long before the entire floor of the library was nothing but a slippery tundra, perfect for 3's ice skates. Strangely enough though, the only thing that remained in its original condition was the small patch of wooden planks underneath Umisu's feet. There seemed to be an invisible circumference around her that actively fought the frost from permeating towards her. 3 then took a white pill from her pockets and swallowed it whole. Power coursed through her veins, momentarily turning her vulnerable. But after a few seconds, the side effects subsided and her strength increased substantially. I will not underestimate you, 3 said to Umisu. My respect for you Dragonborns compels me to bring out my very best weapon in my arsenal. On 3's hands were 2 identical rings, each one on her middle finger. It was all made out of gold except for the blue gem on top. Except this wasn't a normal blue gem at all. This was a mithril relic. 3 ripped out the 2 pieces of mithril relics from her rings and inserted it onto the flaps of her tight-laced boots. And as soon as she did, the blades underneath her soles glowed a bluish tint as an explosion of water and air mana permeated the air, creating a stronger frosting effect. Yet as 3 prepared, Umisu barely moved. She kept the grip on her spear tightly as she looked down on the frozen ground. You guys did all this to scheme against my boss? Umisu muttered. You guys. As she repeated her words, her voice became stronger and stronger, becoming rougher and rougher. Umisu dropped her spear on the ground and descended into the shadows. A second later, a completely new spear emerged. And just from the handle alone, 3 could feel its dominating presence fight through the icy tundra. The frozen floorboards around Umisu began to melt into a puddle, just from the appearance of this spear alone. That glow, that strength, a mithril artifact? 3 saw Umisu's green spear glow brighter than anything she had ever seen. In comparison, her own mithril relic skate shoes were like a candle in front of the sun. My boss, Michael, Umisu muttered as she took hold of the spear. 3 had a bad feeling about this and immediately dashed towards the Dragonborn. Her skate shoes glided on the icy floorboards easily, allowing her speed to increase faster than on foot. She weaved through the shelves with quickness, disappearing and reappearing from Umisu's gaze. She kicked one of the shelves, sending frozen books towards Umisu's way. The book barely grazed her scales. 3 continued to grab books as she glided in the library before tossing them in the air and kicking it towards the standing Dragonborn. Umisu began swing her spear. At first it was slow, missing a few books and letting it almost graze her scales. Then, as her momentum gathered, Her swings became faster and faster, allowing her to create a furious gale of wind that deflected all incoming book outwards, letting them crash into the wall and shattering into a million ice crystals. 3 sped up her skates, running towards the wall at top speeds. And as 3 reached the end of the room, she raised her feet and began skating up and towards the ceiling. It was as if gravity was flipped upside down for her. But in truth, the ice particles in the ceiling felt a magnetic connection to 3 herself, making skating on the ceiling a possibility. 3 reached the metal chandelier in the middle of the room and used her sharp skates to cut it from the ceiling. The heavy metal object imbued with frost magic began falling towards Amisu. 3 followed right behind it as she jumped from the ceiling and kicked down towards the chandelier, increasing the weight and speed of the object. Amisu stood there unfazed on the ground. She kept swinging her spear around her body, gathering momentum, even though there was nothing there to defend against. And as the chandelier was about to hit her, Amisu looked up and showed a fiery rage towards 3. "You dare scheme against Michael?" she screamed out, creating a deafening sound that made 3 subconsciously plug her ears. And as 3 looked down again, she saw Amisu raising her glowing green spear and thrusting it towards her with anger and fury. A huge gust of wind immediately shoved the frozen chandelier back up towards 3, impaling her with the piece she had broken. Paradoxically, 3 felt the wind grow stronger as it hit her, propelling her and the chandelier up towards the ceiling and completely bursting through the other side. 3 vomited out blood as she broke through the second floor of the library, with frozen wooden planks bursting out into splinters. The furious wind from Amisu's spear kept pushing her out into the ceiling before she burst through the rooftop, sending rubble and brick out into the air. 3 felt the wind knocked out of her. She looked down with her eyes completely wide open. Tens of meters up in the air, she saw the library's rooftop completely blown wide open, and in the hole beyond the roof, she could see the second floor where she had burst through, and even beyond that, she saw Amisu with her spear still directed towards her with anger and fury. 3 was helpless as she soared in the night ski, taller than any other building in the neighborhood. Then she slowed down just for a moment, before she came crashing down like a meteor. She sustained multiple broken ribs and bones from just that one thrust alone, giving her no power to even deflect the chandelier as it was falling down over her. She crashed into the stone road, cracking it into pieces. The chandelier buried her deeper, sustaining her even more injuries. "No way," she muttered under her breath. And before she completely lost consciousness, she saw a dark blue dragonborn approach her with the most casual attitude. "My sister's quite scary when she gets angry," he said, putting his glowing katana on his shoulders. She recognized him. It was Jakku, supposedly the strongest out of all the dragonborns. Codename 2 was supposed to deal with him, but seeing as he was still unharmed, the result was obvious. With her consciousness fading, she realized that Hammerstone Company made a massive mistake in crossing the Reborn Company. They were in the same levels as their seniors, those elite fighters serving global corporations. Chapter 254. 6 Acting Crazy. 2 large explosions in close succession rang out around the city, alerting Codename 6 to the disturbance. He looked back, seeing the sight of a woman falling down from the skies with a large chandelier above her. 6 squinted his eyes, realizing that it was none other than one of his comrades in the Stone Cold group. He realized something happened to her, and just as he was about to go towards her, he heard a faint tapping sound. "Biututu, what the hell was that?" he muttered under his breath, looking around to see nothing but an empty street around him lit up by dim oil lamps. Unnerved by that strangely rhythmic noise that seemed to be a product of his imagination, 6 ran towards the direction where 3 landed. As he ran, the subtle sounds of ra-ta-ta became drowned out by the sounds of his hurried footsteps. Once he ran out the corner, 6 slowly peeked out of the street and saw 3 buried in a crater in the middle of the stone brick road. Above her was the metal chandelier, pinning her in place. He was about to move towards her, when he realized that she was not alone. There was a dark blue scaled demi-human standing above her with a sword above his shoulders. "Dragonborn," 6 muttered. "That means both of them are finished." Learning about the defeat of the 2 of the strongest fighters in their Stone Cold group truly put the fear inside 6's heart. Only now did he feel stupid for actively trying to call out a Dragonborn to face him. After all, if 2 and 3 couldn't even put a scratch on their scales in an ambush, then that meant that he, codenamed 6 for being the weakest out of everyone, probably won't even survive a single second of meeting those demi-human monsters. Fortunately for him, Jaka didn't seem to be walking towards him at all. The dark blue dragonborn only said the words, "Have fun hunting," before leisurely walking the other direction, whistling as he did so. Six took this chance to bolt the hell out of there. He ran through streets, dark alleyways, and backyards trying to make it back to the Hammerstone headquarters where he could at least ask for some backup. But as he ran, the hairs on his neck stood up. He quickly turned his head to the side, thinking that there was someone closely following behind him. There was nothing there but empty crates and soil buckets. Biututu.
Rachtata.
There it was again. Those rhythmic tapping and strumming that he kept hearing through the night. Angry, Six took out the large hammer strapped to his back and smashed the crates, exploding into 1,000 splinters. He looked back, turning around in the dark alleyway alone. "Who are you?" he shouted, his voice echoing back at him. "Show yourself." Holding the warhammer with both hands, Six swung his weapon all around him, hitting the stone brick walls around him before shouting "HAA" to scare off his stalker. He looked like he had paranoid schizophrenia. Six closed his eyes and took deep breaths before laughing at himself. He thought himself crazy for thinking such thoughts. His fear of the Dragonborns seemed to have made him a little bit on edge. He strapped the warhammer to his back, but as he looked down on the ground, he saw two large shadows right next to his own. Two large beings were standing directly behind him. "HAA!" Six shouted, swinging his warhammer backwards. Yet it hit nothing but the air. There was no one around him. He looked back down on the ground and saw that the two large shadows he saw seemed to be nothing more than a visual illusion from the two street oil lamps in the street. "What the hell is happening?" he muttered under his breath. Six began running at top speeds back onto the open street before finally seeing the familiar bridge that led straight to the Hammerstone headquarters. He realized that the bridge was shrouded in mist, but he didn't care. He ran straight through it since he knew the directions instinctively. The sound of the river below him let him know that he was crossing the bridge safely. And a few moments later, the mist subsided as he stepped off the stone bridge. However, as he looked forward, he saw that same bridge again in the distance. He looked back and saw that he was right back where he started, where he ran from. What the fuck? An illusion spell? A cold sweat poured down his back. Was there a dragonborn that they didn't account for? Six raised his warhammer, casting the spell, Imbue Snowy Mountain, which created a perfect mound of rocky ice on the two flat ends of his weapon. "Destruction of winter!" he shouted, bringing down his warhammer towards the nearest building in front of him. The weapon broke through stone brick corners, sending rubble and powder flying everywhere. The frost then began to spread all around the unaffected area, turning everything extremely brittle. With another swing, the very front wall of the residential building began to collapse in on itself, sending snowy powder floating in the air. "Show yourself or I'm gonna destroy this whole neighborhood." Just then, a subtle voice echoed. "We're already behind you." Six quickly turned around, warhammer in hand, and saw two different orc species standing side by side in front of him. Seeing the true appearance of his stalker, Six couldn't help but laugh. "I can't believe I got scared by a bunch of orcs," he said. "There are no dragonborns here in sight to help you. You should have just let me leave." The two orcs stayed silent, allowing Six to take initiative and bring his warhammer towards them. He swung his weapon overhead, creating frost that turned the very air around it brittle. As Six brought down his warhammer, the air around it exploded into icicles, which created a domino effect that eventually reached the two orcs. Needle-like icicles exploded in between the two orcs, impaling them with thousands upon thousands of holes in their meaty flesh. Six ran up towards them, dragging his warhammer in the stone road before swinging it horizontally, hitting the hairy orc on his side and sending him crashing into the spiky orc. But as the orc's body got destroyed, it turned into nothing but shadow flames that eventually dissipated in the air. It was another illusion. "Damn it! Stop with all these tricks. You're just mere orcs." Just then, Six felt a stinging pain in his stomach that override his every sense. He looked down and saw a gaping hole in his abdomen, with an orc's fist covered in flame-like shadows sticking out of it. Slowly, he felt his consciousness fade into nothingness. But then he woke up. Six looked around and found himself back in the empty street as before, with the bridge right in front of him. There was no destruction of property, there was no gaping hole in his stomach, and there were no orcs around anywhere to see. But the pain he felt was real, so real that he didn't think it was an illusion. "Biututu, Arya," He looked behind and saw the same two orcs standing perfectly still, with shadows flickering around them. Six finally realized it. He was stuck in an illusion. In the real world, his true body was already knocked out cold in the alleyway, with the two shadow orcs standing over him coldly. They were just letting him experience the pain of death over and over again, not letting him leave the hellish illusion of perpetual death. From the moment he heard the rhythmic sounds of biu tutu and ra-ta-ta, the fight was already finished. He was already caught in their spell. Chapter 255. Grieve v4. I don't know what I'm still doing here, codenamed 4 muttered leisurely. By this point, I'm sure they'd leave no dragonborn left for me to hunt. Grieve chuckled, cackling at the youngster's arrogance. Must be nice to be so young, Grieve said naturally. Barely out of the womb yet confident and proud to face anything in life. Such things are quite envious, at least I think so. You've been talking a lot. Are you their leader or something? For asked, rudely pointing at the hooded man in front of him. You can say that. Well, I hope you'll at least give me a good exercise. I would hate for my trip to be wasted on bums. In terms of ranking, how do you think you would fare against those dragonborns? Grieve raised his head and tilted it, seriously considering the question posed to him by the burly man. The weakest out of them all, I think. They are quite talented youngsters after all. For sighed and shrugged his shoulders. Good enough for me. I'll just finish this quickly so that I can go back faster. He reached down and raised a large heavy sword from the ground. The very blade itself was even wider and taller than most humans, making for a very intimidating weaponry. The heavy sword was made out of a metal and Damascus steel alloy that emphasized power and weight, creating the most devastating weapon available in anyone's hands. Its heaviness prevented Four from even using a normal horse and carriage, for they would break in half trying to carry his sword. Yet, thanks to his muscular physique, Four was able to wield the heavy sword as if it was as light as a feather. He tossed it in the air and caught it with one hand, showing off his strength to the intimidated red mankeys hiding behind the trees. Show it to me, Four said casually, to which Grieve did not answer. Four raised the heavy sword and swung it wide, creating a heavy wind that ruffled dead leaves, branches, and the quiet forestry around them. A moment later, tens of trees fell crashing onto the ground, with the sounds of splintering woods echoing in the forest. Upon closer inspection, it was cut from the thickest parts of its base with a clean incision, which seemed to have been done by a surgical knife. Four swung his heavy sword around haphazardly like a stick, showing the ease in which he wielded the hefty weapon. Though this intimidation tactic didn't seem to have worked on the hooded figure opposite him. I know you have it, show it to me, Four demanded. My brother Five would not have lost against that dragonborn if you guys were not in possession of a mithril relic. That is the only way he would have been defeated. Grieve looked up at Four and raised his hand. He showed a glove with a glowing ring on its middle finger. A bluish-green aura radiated from the ring, showing its intense magical properties. Four eyed the ring with seriousness. He could feel the power from it. Good. It's good that you know to immediately wield your greatest weapon against me. It's the only way you'll survive. Four took out a glowing gem of his own from his necklace. This was another mithril relic, despite it being substantially smaller and weaker than the one wielded by Grieve. He inserted this relic gem on the end of his heavy sword's hilt, imbuing it with the power of water and air mana, combining into an icy frost. Ah, if that mithril relic of yours proves better than mine, then I shall take it as my spoils after your defeat. Very well, Grieve nodded, accepting the conditions of the duel. The excited feeling knocking out from his ribbed chest told him that this was not the first time he had felt this before. It felt like he was coming back into familiar territory, like coming back home. Grieve walked forward with his hands on his robe. Going weaponless? Four asked incredulously. Bold, but I respect it. I just hope you don't regret it. Four used frostbite of the mammoth, turning his heavy sword into a curving elephant's trunk that swooped down towards Grieve. The heavy sword struck the ground with speed and force, creating an explosion of dirt and soil before a seismic earthquake shook the entire forest awake. Birds and bats flew away in fear, while critters ran away in droves. Four's smile lessened as he saw the heavy sword impaled on the ground, but without its target. Grieve stood just a few inches away with his gloved hand on the heavy sword's blade, seemingly pushing it away. Grah! Four screamed, taking back his great sword and swinging it around himself, creating momentum before using it to smash Grieve's head to the ground. but the flat blade of his sword hit nothing but the disturbed soil. Grieve was luckily a few inches further away from the sword's grasp. Annoyed, for shouted, frozen weight of the hilt, swinging his heavy sword towards Grieve. The edge of his blade created a crescent-shaped ice slash that shot towards the hooded Grieve. It was as heavy as the sword itself, yet coming at speeds almost twice as fast as his swing. This time, For was able to see how Grieve smoothly stepped away from the slash with efficient footwork and timing. The crescent ice slash cleaved through 5 trees before crashing onto a small mound of rock in the ground and infecting it with frozen ice magic. "Show me how you fight," For shouted, sending a flurry of crescent slashes towards Grieve. Yet, the hooded figure simply avoided the dangerous obstacles through footwork, seemingly disappearing from sight at the very last second and reappearing just as the slash shot past him. "If you aren't going to fight me, then I'll fight these monkeys." For sent out a single crescent slash towards a group of red mankeys hiding behind a tree. It was coming towards them at speeds they couldn't even react to. Just as they were about to be hit, Grieve suddenly appeared in front of them and took the crescent slash head-on, swinging his hand and deflecting the ice up towards the sky. "You broke the conditions of our duel," Grieve muttered, disappointed. "And for that you will have to pay dearly." Grieve raised his hand and showed the glove containing the mithril artifact ring. Using his other hand, he twisted the golden band before slowly pulling the ring out of his finger. "Hey, what the hell are you doing? Are you forfeiting our fight?" For shouted. Grieve shook his head. "No, insolent one. I am simply giving you what you wish for." As he took the ring out of his finger, a bluish-green aura suddenly exploded out of his very body, disintegrating the hooded cloth around him. For felt his instincts jump, telling to back away immediately. His eyes widened as the robe began to show what was hidden underneath. He began to realize who, or what, he had been fighting against this entire time. You see, this is no ordinary mithril artifact. Unlike the ones used by the Dragonborns, my ring does not give me magical powers. In fact, it limits it. As the ring left Grieve's finger, the full power of his 9-star cultivation erupted uncontrollably. The grass underneath his feet decayed in less than a second as it got exposed to his overflowing necrotic energy. For stood there, shaking, as he looked at the undead general skeleton in front of him. Fear took the strength out of his body, feeling weakness in his arms and fingers, making him drop the heavy sword into the ground. "The game is over, young one. I simply hope you get a second chance in life like me." Then, foresaw the whole world turning sideways. As he looked around, he saw his own body on the side, standing still, missing its head. Slowly, his consciousness faded into nothingness, never to return again. Chapter 256. Lifestones. Back in the castle, the night celebrations and merry dancing were stopped by the appearance of one young man named Christian Hammerstone. He stole everyone's attention without care. Just the fact that he arrived so late in the night meant that he didn't treat the Duke with a lot of respect. Some might call it justified since he was a descendant of the famous Hephaestus Corporation, but many would simply call it arrogance. "Duke Stelmane, there is no better option than me," he said, approaching the metal automobile. "Whatever the Reborn company has offered you, I am sure that my company can give you as well." Christian noticed the unique R symbol embedded onto the automobile's side door. Since the Duke was riding it with his wife, he assumed that this was a gift from Michael to tip the scales of favor towards his way. "This metal contraption is not very efficient at all," he said boldly. "You would need 4 horses to pull on a metal carriage like this. It simply shows that our Hammerstone company is a lot wiser than any other young company in this city. After all, I have my family's experience to draw back from. Siding with me is a simple recipe for success." However, the Duke didn't seem impressed, and neither were the guests around him. They knew his words were worth nothing after seeing the capabilities of the automobile. "You know nothing, Chris." "It's Christian," the boy corrected. "You were a fine lad when you were a child," the Duke said sentimentally. "Your father guided you in the right ways of building a company. What has happened to you to be so ignorant?" Christian smacked his mouth rudely, turning away from the Duke and not wanting to hear another one of his sermons. "Opportunity is what happened," Christian shouted, his voice in a high pitch. "Right now, my brothers, sisters, cousins, and friends are all participating in the competition, and even they are completely outmatched from the real companies controlling the market." He pointed at the Duke and everyone else. "This is a warning. The sharks are coming, and they smell blood in the water. It won't be long before they come swimming down the plains of the Queen's regions and come knocking on your doors. Didn't you know that Batroc Town is already under control of an Oscorp subsidiary company? I heard that they fought hard for their independence, but ended up losing it in the end. The Duke was startled and the rest of the guests gasped as they heard the unexpected news. It was as if their whole belief was shattered in an instant, making them feel uneasy and unsteady for the future that was to come. That's so near here, one of the guests uttered silently, yet his voice was heard by all. If they're getting conquered, then what about us? This is bad for business. That was the only conclusion they could all come to. It wasn't hard to imagine what was happening in Batroc Town right now. Local businesses would immediately struggle. At best, companies would have to pay enormous amounts of tax. At worst, they would get thrown out of town for fear of them becoming too much of a threat to their reign. Meanwhile, in a time of crisis, the reigning company had the authority to turn normal citizens into soldiers to fight something they didn't want in the first place. As for the royals previously in charge of the territory, their fates were usually one with a grim ending. Even if Duke Stelmane tried to keep a still face, the anxiety he felt in his heart couldn't help but leak out into his expression. He got out of the automobile and faced Christian with a serious face. "Are you sure about this? Where did you hear it?" "I saw it with my own eyes," Christian replied. "It's one of the reasons why I'm late. I had to stop by and see why the whole town was set ablaze." The Duke paced back and forth as all sorts of thoughts flowed through his mind. Not even his wife could calm him down, as he rejected her attempt at holding his hand. "This is the reason why you need me," Christian pleaded. "The only thing that can push off a sub-company of a global conglomerate is another sub-company from an equally strong conglomerate, me. I'm the only one that can fight off against that Oscorp sub-company." It was evident in the Duke's eyes that he was seriously considering the boy's offer. Having the backing of the Hephaestus company would assure a safety net behind the city in the case that the Oscorp subsidiary company decided to expand further than Batroc. The looming threat of the upcoming territorial war between the conglomerate sub-companies sent an ominous mood that permeated throughout every man and woman around. Some of them were even considering to hitch their own companies to Hammerstone in the hopes that they would also get saved in the future. It was a smart move, truly, and the only one they could make in such times. But then, the Duke looked at the golden-haired boy in the middle of the castle grounds, realizing that there was another solution to this problem. Something that would not require him to relinquish his reins over to a boy. "Why you?" Duke Stelmane asked Christian. "Why can't I ask help from the Reborn company?" Christian shook his head, disappointed. Then, he gestured for his personal bodyguard to come closer to the Duke. "Show the Duke the life stones," Christian ordered. Codename 1 obediently approached and took out 4 gems from his pocket, each about the size of a large bean and glowing with a white intensity similar to the moon. These rough-edged stones pulsated with a rhythmic pattern, dimming and brightening once every second. "Tonight, I sent out 4 elite soldiers, each hand-picked directly from the Hephaestus Training Academy, and sent them to seek out the greatest fighters of the Reborn Company, the so-called Dragonborns," Christian explained. "And these life stones are directly linked to those 4 warriors. Right now, the glow of these stones indicate that they are fully awake and conscious. By now, they must have met their targets and attacked them with great skill and power. In about 3 candles worth of time, my elite soldiers will return from their duty and bring the news that they have successfully bested the Dragonborns of Reborn." The Duke looked back at Michael with worry. If those warriors were indeed picked from the Hephaestus Training Academy, then their level of skill is nothing less than world-class. But instead of panic and anxiousness, Michael showed an expression of calmness. Michael looked at 1 and Christian. "Are you sure about that?" he asked them. Just then, 1 felt the life stones in his palms start to shake with intensity, almost rolling out of his hands. Then, a life stones turned completely black, with no glow whatsoever. It looked like a normal quartz stone. Surprise and shock filled 1's eyes, much more so Christian's. But then, it wasn't long before the second one turned dim as well. And then a few moments after that, the third one had its light snuffed out in an instant. "What the hell is happening?" Christian shouted to 1. Their last saving grace was the final life stone staying completely still in 1's palms. But a second later, the stone exploded out into 1,000 fragments, leaving only powder residue all over his hand. Chapter 257. Let Michael have his fun. "What the hell does this mean?" Christian asked 1 angrily. Stone Cold 1, the strongest out of their group, knew the meaning of the light fading out of the life stones. It meant that they lost, plain and simple. However, he could not bear to disappoint the young master for the failure of his group. Meanwhile, the Duke looked at Michael and saw no surprise from him. Michael expected this. He knew this would happen. "I've seen enough," Duke Stelmane announced. "Your elite soldiers failed in defeating the Dragonborns, it seems." Christian looked back at the Duke, opening his mouth and failing to say anything to refute him. This was completely out of the realm of possibilities in his mind. The Stone Cold Six were elite warriors brought up by his family. They were supposed to be at the top of the line. "Looks like my original decision is correct. The true path that Angora City shall take is the one with the Reborn company right by its side." "This is unfair," Christian cried out, stomping his foot on the ground like an angry child. "Christian," the Duke called out softly, trying to appease the boy, "even if the Dragonborns had lost, I still would have chosen them as my sponsor. It is not a matter of strength but principles. Your attitude tonight made me realize that if you were to become a sponsor of Angora City, you would treat my citizens and as your resources to conquer other territories. You would simply use our city to further your own goals of competing against the other companies." Christian crossed his arms angrily. "But they're doing it too," he reasoned. "Why can they do it while I can't?" The Duke approached Christian and ruffled the boy's hair, treating him as the same child that he was years ago. "That is not the way your father taught you to handle business. He was a righteous man, and you should have followed in his footsteps rather than be caught up by bad influences." Christian's eyes started to well up as his emotions bubbled under the surface. Anger, disappointment, shame. These were the emotions that an 11-year-old child cannot yet handle properly. "Get off me," Christian shouted, swatting away the Duke's comforting hand. Then he turned to Michael and pointed right at his face. This is all your fault. If you hadn't meddled in my business, then I would have had everything I wanted." Christian looked to his bald bodyguard and uttered the key phrase, "Attack him! Chris N.O.!" the Duke screamed, but it was already too late. One took the sword out from his scabbard and rushed towards Michael. His arrival almost seemed instantaneous in the eyes of the normal guests. 1 second he was behind Christian and the Duke, and the next he was in front of Michael with the sword just inches away from his neck. Just then, a prismatic shield appeared and fought against the sword, clashing with its metal blade and creating sparks all around. KYA! The sudden explosion of murderous intent scared the guests witless, leaving them screaming and crying out in desperation as they tried to escape into safety. The Duke guided the guests inside his castle, where they would be safe from harm. "Damn it! Where's my soldiers?" the Duke screamed in frustration. There seemed to be no one present in his castle but shadows in the night. He took out a whistle from his pocket. Once he blew this, soldiers from all over the city would gather at the castle walls to try and subdue the criminal. But just as the Duke raised the whistle to his mouth, he felt a sudden grip on his wrist. Duke Stelmane looked down and saw a visible shadow taking hold of his arm. Following it, he saw the shadow connected to a strange hood-wearing violet blob of slime in front of him. "No need for that," Fudge said casually to the Duke. "Let my master have his fun." The Duke eyed Fudge with confusion. That guy's at the peak of the 5-star cultivation. His concern was valid. Who wouldn't worry after seeing an 11-year-old boy get attacked by a superhuman soldier trained to kill his targets in the most efficient of ways? Yet Fudge assured the Duke, "Just watch my master. He learned something good recently and he wants to try it out." Duke Stelmane could only watch with concerned eyes as Michael faced off against the Stone Cold One. One exerted extreme force to his sword as he tried to penetrate through the protective shield around Michael. However, the absolute unity defense around Michael counteracted the fire and earth mana inside the metal itself to push it further away. If one wanted to push even further, he would have to risk his sword getting turned into metal slag. "TSK. That strange defense again," he muttered under his breath. As one struggled, Michael took this time to observe the opponent right in front of him, sensing the mana contained around his body. There's lots of water and air mana in his cores, which means he's powerful in the ice spells. He's wearing a variant of the icy blue armor that 5 wore in the arena, with this one having iceberg-like shoulder guards that didn't impede his sword movements. This equipment is made with magic power in mind, not purely physical power. He looks like the strongest 5-star fighter I've ever faced. At least before myself, he concluded. And a moment later he was proven right. One retracted his sword and chanted, "Hephaestus chilled flames." before using his finger to brush the blade from the base to its tip, with his touch leaving a blue fire that seemed to emanate a cold mist. The absence of fire mana in those flames fascinated Michael. It was made out of pure water and air mana, imitating the structure of fire to achieve actual flames. "Frozen dragon, one strike!" he shouted, swinging his sword in graceful stances that left a trail of icy blue flames in the air. Michael felt as if he was watching a Chinese cultivation donghua. As one slashed the air, a pattern emerged from the trailing flames. A long and thin stretch of body moved across the air, like a snake slithering in its lair. Yet, this snake had icy blue fiery scales and clawed legs near its tail and shoulders. Soon, a head formed at the very top, with a long protruding mouth filled with sharp teeth and two long shrimp antennae near its nose. Its jaws unclenched, roaring directly at Michael. This was a dragon, but not the one that looked similar to Western fantasy, but one closer to the depiction of Chinese mythology. Michael was so entranced at the appearance of the blue flame dragon that he almost welcomed its descent towards him. At the very last second, he used flight and shot up tens of meters up in the air, dodging the dragon's lunge. As the dragon hit the ground, the stone brick flooring exploded into rubble and icy flames, turning the castle grounds into an almost hellish landscape. Stones burning with blue flames fell from the skies and hit the ground, spreading a deadly frost that turned everything into an icicle. Michael looked down from the skies, amazed at the power of the dragon. Magic Theory acquired ChatJK4's voice echoed in his head. Just then, as the mist from the explosion subsided down, he saw the reformed dragon rush towards the sky. One rode in its head, with his sword pointed directly at Michael. Chapter 258. Taking Control of the Reins. One sword was imbued with the power of a mithril relic the size of a fist. It emanated an icy blue power that seemed to feed into the dragon below him. "Icy dragon's breath!" one screamed, thrusting his sword and commanding the dragon to release a giant ball of blue flames the size of an elephant. Michael floated above, with air mana propelling his feet and hands upwards. His mind began analyzing the mana composition of the icy ball of fire, watching as the wisps of water and air mana come out of one sword to empower the ball of the blue ball of flames. It only took a few milliseconds before ChatJK4 gave him an answer in his mind. A flow of information washed over his brain, giving him the necessary magic theory to cast an entirely new 5-star mystical art spell specifically designed to counteract the icy dragon's breath. "Let's call this the Icy Dragon Breath Mint," Michael thought to himself as an equally large ball of magma manifested in front of him. This magma flowed upon itself like a newborn planet, spewing out chunks of lava as the layers subducted under itself. As the icy ball of fire hit the magma planet, everything exploded into a flurry of white lights sparkling in the air, caused by the complete annihilation of the mana particles contained in the two spheres. "What?" one shouted his shock, pulling his reins on the dragon and stopping mid-air. Those that tried to destroy his icy ball of flames using water magic or any kind of spell would be faced by an uncontrollable explosion of steam that he would have taken advantage of. Yet, somehow, his icy dragon breath was completely neutralized in a mere second. Down below in the castle grounds, Tracheus looked up at the night sky with his eyes showing complete disbelief. "A perfect counterspell," he muttered under his breath. He didn't expect to see such a high-level execution of a counterspell tonight. Even he couldn't do it reliably. Creating a magic spell to perfectly cancel another spell was a technique that required absolute precision, boundless creativity, and perfect mastery over mana to execute. If one knew how easy Michael made it look, he would have realized that he was completely outclassed. Michael was just toying with him, but one kept fighting. He took the flaming blue dragon's antennae and whipped it, causing the creature to rush towards Michael. The dragon's body slithered up and down in the air, its jaws wide open as it preyed upon Michael in a circle. Once one was positioned out of Michael's line of sight, the dragon swooped in and used its sharp, flaming claws to tear Michael into pieces. The flaming claws reached the invisible prismatic shield, sending white sparks all over the place as the icy blue flames tried to fight the Unity defense. It didn't work. A repelling force pushed the dragon backwards, causing it to be submerged in a large collection of clouds, obscuring it from view. Then silence. A few seconds later, the sky rumbled as an icy cone pierced through the gray mist and revealed a snow-tipped mountain crashing towards Michael like a meteor. "Mountain pass!" one screamed, coming behind the mountain riding his dragon. Michael felt as if Mount Everest itself was raining down on him. Its grandness covered the moonlight, casting a shadow over his entire being. The mountain fell through the air before crashing directly towards the castle walls, disintegrating the stone brick walls that it collided into. Chunks of the rocky mountain flew everywhere before dissipating into a mist of pure mana. The destruction in the wall led the nearby stone bricks to fall forwards, crashing into the moat below and creating a splashing sound as it did so. Up above, one looked down at the rubble, hoping to see Michael's body among it. Unfortunately for him, Michael was nowhere to be found. Just then, he saw a shadow flashed above him. He looked up and saw Michael standing in the air with his arms crossed, completely unscathed from the literal mountain that he threw at him. The stone-cold warrior gripped his sword tighter, feeling the heat of the fight finally come to him. He couldn't find a way to break through Michael's defenses. It was like he was invulnerable. "I'll find a way to defeat you," one swore. Michael shrugged. "You can't, but you're welcome to try." Suddenly, Michael's arms lit up in a strangely familiar blue flame. One was dazed as he felt the cold breeze emanating from Michael. "No!" one muttered. It can't be." His fears came true as Michael imitated his sword stances using nothing but his arms. The icy blue flames in Michael's hands left a frosty residue in the air that slowly formed into a slender body with flaming scales and extended snout. "That's impossible!" one screamed as he stared at the creature in front of him. Michael created an icy dragon of his own. He copied the unique physical art spell passed down only through enrolling in the Hephaestus Training Academy. Michael jumped on top of the dragon's head, standing directly above its skull. With a single gesture from him, the dragon soared in the air, meeting eye to eye with one's dragon. The two looked completely identical, down to the flaming scales and sharp-clawed legs. It was a jaw-dropping moment for one. He stared at the dragon in front of him, wondering what kind of illusion Michael had cast. Yet soon he would be completely proven wrong. "Fire!" Michael muttered. His dragon opened its jaws wide, with mana gathering at the tip of its canine teeth. Water vapors flowed out of the mouth, turning into mist as it traveled in the air. The combination of water and air mana created a giant ball of icy flames even bigger than an elephant. It was one's signature move, the icy dragon's breath, and as it shot towards him, the more he was sure of it. He raised his sword, using his stances to create a defensive wall of ice. However, his unsteady mental state forced a mistake in his sword's positioning, causing the ice to suddenly melt into a gaseous vapor. The ball of icy fire crashed into one's dragon, causing it to reel back in pain, uncontrollably shimmering in and out of the air. The collision sent one flying backwards. He tried to hold onto the dragon's antenna, but failed to get a proper grip. He fell from the skies, struggling to get a grasp onto his injured flaming dragon. As he plummeted down, he extended his hand to the dragon, telepathically commanding it to swoop in and save him. The dragon slowly regained its solid form after Michael's attack. It looked down at one, seeing its creator just a few seconds away from crashing into the ground. Yet the dragon shook its head. One felt his connection over the dragon cut off, losing all the mana attached to it from his cores. Coldness spread through his body, but not because of ice, but because of the absence of something, the absence of mana. He crashed into the castle grounds, creating a large crater with stone brick roads. He groaned, feeling multiple broken bones inside his body. But he couldn't care about that. He looked up and saw his ice dragon looking down coldly at him. At its side was Michael and his dragon. The two dragons soared through the air in unison, completely under Michael's will. Cold blood rushed through his head as he realized that Michael took control of his own magic spell. Chapter 259. Frosty Explosion. Silence filled the night except for the crackling of fire above. The two ice flame dragons hovered in the air, looking down at the castle grounds below. It was an incomprehensible sight for mortals and mages alike. Even those not adept in the complexities of the mystic arts knew that a spell was something intricately connected to its caster. It was an extension of themselves like another limb. Yet now, they saw Michael wrench control of the dragon right under one's nose. It followed Michael's order as if the dragon had no connection to its original caster in the first place. No one knew how absurd this was more than Tracheus, the seven-star tower master. Cerberus' words came crawling back to Tracheus. All those hyperbolic descriptions of Michael's talents in the mystic arts didn't seem so excessive now given what he just witnessed. In fact, genius wouldn't even begin to describe the mastery it would take to do something that Michael did so easily. How is this possible? One muttered, with blood spilling out of his mouth. With the 2 dragons under his feet, Michael floated down. You weren't using your mana correctly, he said to one. I can, so I took it. His supreme skill gave him complete mastery over mana, not just his own, but also everything around him. Taking ownership of a magic spell was as easy as breathing for him. 1. Feeling the despair of loss overcoming his body, gritted his teeth. His desperation fueled him to grab his sword from its hilt and smashed its bottom onto a jagged rock, displacing the mithril relic, tumbling a couple of times before landing just a few inches away from his head. With shaking hands, 1 took the icy blue mithril relic and forced it into his mouth, swallowing it whole. What are you doing? Tracheus shouted at him. What he did was nothing less than suicidal. But for 1, losing was already equivalent to death. Fighting Michael made him feel like he was facing against an insurmountable wall, something that he could not overcome through all his powers. Replicating magic spells he only saw once, taking control of someone else's magic spells. Michael's talents in the mystical arts were nothing less than a cheat and an unfair power. So, the only way 1 was going to defeat him was to take extraordinary measures. Grhhh! He screamed as the mithril relic began to wreck his entire body. The amount of power contained in that gem was not meant to be consumed by a human, for it would destroy them completely from the inside out. His skin began to tear, revealing a glowing blue light from the inside, evidence of the mithril relic releasing all its power in his innards. The pain he was going through was indescribable, worse than death. Yet for a brief moment, he felt unprecedented power running through his veins. 2 new points of light spawned inside his abdomen, letting his cultivation shoot through from a 5-star power up to the 7-star realm. Ha ha, ha ha ha. He laughed with a coarse voice, seemingly echoing in the night. Michael looked at 1's body and saw the mana in his cores going haywire. It was fighting the influx of power coming from the mithril relic, trying to subdue it for its own. However, it was too powerful, eventually creating cracks inside his mana cores. However, 1 didn't seem to mind this at all. He floated into a standing position and faced the night sky. Power! I have unlimited power! He screamed, spreading his hands wide. A beam of frost shot out of the cracks in his hands, hitting the walls and the towering spire of the main castle. The tremendous force turned a large part of the castle roof into an ice sculpture before exploding out into 1,000,000 iced particles and revealing the interior below. Some unfortunate guests inside the castle fell victim to the destruction, getting buried under the falling ice debris. Michael knew that 1 couldn't control his power. If he were left alone any more than this, he could end up destroying the whole castle and harming everyone inside. He had to stop this. Let go of the power or this won't end well for you, Michael warned him. 1 looked at Michael with his pure blue light eyes and tilted his cracking head. You? Look at me. I have unlimited power. You cannot control me. Michael raised his right fist and said, If you move even a single twitch, I will fire. He had his thumb unfolded and his pointy finger aimed directly at Stone Cold 1. He had created a simple finger gun, which didn't seem to be threatening enough for the maddened 1. And what are you going to do with that? He scoffed. He was at the peak of 7-star cultivation. He was almost twice as fast as before. And with the power supplied to him by the mithril artifact, even those 2 dragons would have to cower under his feet. And despite the power ruining his body, 1 knew that Michael's mystical art spells still fell victim to its inherent weakness. It was slow. Compared to physical art spells, mystical spells were slow to fire and reach their target, meaning 1 would be able to dash out of the way before Michael cast his spell. With a smile, 1's muscle twitched as he used an upscaled version of the ice speed footwork spell to disappear from Michael's sight, frost building on his feet. But as soon as he did, a bright flash of light blinded his eyes. A moment later, his vision came back and everything looked normal. Yet, when he looked down, he saw a tiny hole within his robe, something not even noticeable at all. But a second later, blood spread around the fabric, revealing that he had a small circular wound in his chest that pierced straight through the back. What? He uttered, confused. He looked up at Michael and saw wisps of smoke coming off his pointy finger. As the blood spilled out of his wound, 1 slowly lost consciousness and transferred over to the void of death. Unfortunately, his control over the last dredges of resistance in his body was the only thing preventing the rampage of the mithril relic. 1 fell to the ground face first, with the cracks in his body beginning to widen and with bright blue light leaking out with much greater intensity than before. The ground shook as the power of untamed mana began to wreak havoc in the surroundings. Seeing the mana in one's body start to collapse and annihilate each other, Michael knew that this was a bomb about to detonate. It wouldn't be long before the mithril relic would explode, taking the entire castle with it. Michael raised his hands and commanded the 2 ice flame dragons by his side to swoop down and take one's body up in the air. The dragons used their claws, dragging one's corpse up in the night sky. They soared higher than they ever did before, higher up above the clouds. As they reached the starry skies, one's body stopped trembling. Then, boom! It exploded into a flurry of ice crystals spreading wide over the skyline of Angora City. The explosion propagated a cool breeze in the air, creating snow and hail falling from the skies, and bringing the winter season earlier than expected. Chapter 260, Finger Gun. Michael looked up and let a snowflake fall to his palms. He thought back to the killing blow he inflicted upon one. That was power of his secret trump card, Unity Gun. This was the idea that formed in his mind after upgrading ChatJK4 software. The complexity of the magic spell was so hard that it took his personal AI assistant 12 hours to finish its synthesis. After all, this spell was a combination of physical and mystical arts. Using the knowledge of how mana flow worked in physical art spells, ChatJK4 changed the course of his veins to imitate the inner workings of a modern gun. With his pointy finger as the barrel, his thumb as the iron sight, and his Unity mana as the bullet, Michael created a miniature explosion at the back of his knuckles to propel the Unity bullet out of his body. Then, using the knowledge of all the mystical art spells in his arsenal, Michael created a small focus point to condense the bullet into a small laser that reached its target almost instantaneously. The results turned out even better than he expected. He felt like he held the power of the Godforge in his hands, having the capabilities to burn through anything it touched. With just his pointy finger, Michael perhaps created the most devastating attack anyone could have ever thought of. The rest of the guests peeked out of the castle gates, still wary of what had happened just a few seconds earlier. However, they saw no sign of the maniac one. Instead, they only saw the golden-haired boy standing above in the air, floating alone as snow and hail fell slowly from the skies. They saw what happened. They witnessed Michael defeat one with his own magic spells. Their perception of the Reborn company would forever change because of this. They thought their leader was someone born into power as an heir. But as it turned out, Michael's power was the real deal. The Duke looked up at Michael, his eyes glistening with complexity. He walked over to the Tower Master and uttered, "I underestimated his talent in magic. I never thought he was capable of doing any of this." Tracheus shook his head. "This is beyond the realm of genius," he replied. "What Michael did today was something that cannot be replicated even by me or any other mystic master in the world. He is blessed by mana unlike anyone in history." Michael's last move was what truly surprised the great Tower Master. The finger point. From his perspective, a single beam of light emanated from Michael's pointy finger and instantaneously reached one's body. There was no magic circle, no magic theory, no mana signatures, nothing. It was as if pure magic and power itself had pierced through his body. Even he, in the hundreds of years of knowledge stored in his brain from studying in the magic tower, failed to decipher anything about the light from the finger. It was indescribable. But it seemed there was one person who didn't appreciate Michael's overwhelming show of force. Christian Hammerstone fell on his knees, slamming his fist on the ground. "No!" he screamed in denial. "This can't be happening." He pointed at the Duke, his eyes reddened. "Why can't you let my company have your city? You were my godfather. Instead, you're going to let an unranked company become the sponsor. How unfair is that?" The Duke shook his head, completely disappointed in what had occurred in his very own castle. He couldn't help but laugh at Christian's insolence. This kid knew nothing at all. "Even now, you know nothing at all. I'll show you the truth." He walked over to a large chest near the drawbridge and opened it up, revealing a huge stack of papers inside. He picked up everything his hands could carry and threw it in the air, letting the papers fly through the cold breeze. The papers scattered, reaching high up in the air before falling back down to the castle grounds. The guests picked the papers on the ground, and as they glazed over its contents, their eyes began to widen with shock and surprise. Meanwhile, Christian saw one paper float directly towards him. He realized that it was a newspaper article dated today. He didn't even have to pick it up to reach the large bold text at the top of the page. Reborn Company debuts at the 450th spot in the Golden 500. Christian's eyes widened, picking up the paper with angry, trembling hands. He began to read the contents of the article, reading about the introduction of the Reborn Company to the Queen's region, how they renovated Orcustown into something completely unrecognizable, and how they were rebuilding the original Golden Road. Tears dropped onto the paper, staining the ink. Becoming part of the Golden 500 just a month after its debut was unprecedented, and was not even something that direct heirs like Christian could hope to do. And the Reborn didn't just graze the very last rankings, they breezed past them and reached the 450th spot. Christian ripped the paper in half and in his anger, threw a large vase towards Michael. The pot wasn't even going to reach Michael, but suddenly, an arrow pierced through the vase, shattering the clay and splashing the pot water in the ground. Michael looked above the castle walls and saw the silhouette of a figure in front of the moon, holding a bow and arrow. It was Shiina. She had been positioned here this entire time, watching and waiting. "Sorry for interrupting, Lord Michael, but I couldn't let that vase stain your dashing white clothes." "Sorry you didn't get to fight," Michael said to her, with his voice transmitting to the shadow underneath her feet. "It would ease my mind if you had let me take care of that pesky one, but it was an honor for me to watch you put on a masterclass," she replied, bowing to Michael from afar. Meanwhile, the Duke walked over. "Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.